My wife lied about being pregnant while I was paying off her student loans, so I walked away and took every asset she owned. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and I thought I'd finally found the woman I'd spend my life with. Claire had this way of lighting up a room with just a smile, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I'd met someone I could trust completely. We'd been together for 3 years before getting married. I'd watched her slowly become part of my routine, part of my life, part of my future. I never thought I'd be one of those guys who let love completely consume him, but with Claire, it felt natural, effortless. Financially, I'd always been careful. I paid my bills on time, saved diligently, and tried to make smart choices with my money. When Claire told me she was struggling with her student loans, my first instinct was to help. "We're in this together," she'd said, her voice soft, almost trembling. I believed her. I convinced myself that supporting her now would set us up for a shared future later. Even though it meant skipping nights out with friends and working extra shifts, I didn't hesitate. I wanted to build something real with her, a life where neither of us would feel the stress of money again, of course. There were tiny cracks, the little things that didn't sit right at first. She'd occasionally dodge questions about her finances, giving vague answers or changing the subject with a laugh. Sometimes she'd roll her eyes, "You'd worry too much," and I'd force a smile, letting her charm soothe my nagging doubts. I told myself everyone had secrets, and hers weren't mine to judge. I rearranged my schedule, spent weekends going over paperwork, transferring payments, making sure everything lined up. It was exhausting, but I felt proud to be building our future, proud to be part of a partnership that felt so complete. Every morning when I woke up and saw her asleep next to me, I told myself I'd made the right choice. I was marrying someone honest, someone loving, someone who deserved my trust, and I believed it completely. Little did I know that trust was about to become the most dangerous mistake of my life. I started noticing small things, little inconsistencies, that nagged at the back of my mind, but I kept brushing them off. Claire would get sudden phone calls and step out of the room, muttering, "Just work stuff," or she'd leave her laptop open for a second, and I'd see bills or transfers I didn't recognize. At first I told myself I was being paranoid. She was busy, right? Everyone had things they kept private. But then, friends started dropping hints too, in casual conversations that made me uneasy. One night, a colleague mentioned seeing her out at a bar downtown, right after she'd claimed to be exhausted from work. Another friend said she seemed unusually flirtatious with someone I didn't know. Despite all of this, Claire remained charming, persuasive, and careful. Whenever I brought up anything that seemed off, she would tilt her head and give me that soft, exasperated smile. "You're overthinking again, babe," she said once, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "I promise, I'm telling you everything you need to know." Her tone was soothing enough that I almost believed her, and I wanted to. I wanted to believe she was the person I thought she was. Then came the pregnancy news. She announced it one quiet evening, and I felt my chest tighten with excitement. "We're going to have a family," she said, eyes glistening, hand on her stomach. I remember the way the room smelled, that freshly brewed coffee, a hint of vanilla from the candle burning in the corner. I was overwhelmed with this mixture of joy and responsibility, and without a second thought, I promised her I'd do whatever I could to prepare. I started working even longer hours, skipping lunches and cutting into weekends just to make sure every payment, every extra expense would be covered. I was proud. I thought I was showing love, commitment, the kind of devotion that would keep our little family safe. And yet, despite all that effort, the tiny part of me so small I could barely recognize it started whispering, "Something isn't right," but I silenced it. I had to. I loved her, and love shouldn't doubt, right? And I was about to find out just how wrong that assumption could be. By this point, my life was revolving entirely around Claire and what I believed was our future. Every morning I dragged myself out of bed, already exhausted from nights spent crunching numbers and transferring funds to cover her loans, rent, and the growing stack of pregnancy expenses. I'd barely eaten breakfast before diving into emails, calls, and paperwork. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and printed receipts, and the hum of my laptop became a constant companion. I justified it all as love, as sacrifice, as the cost of building something lasting with the woman I adored. Claire seemed to sense my dedication, and first, it made her cling to me even more. She'd brush her hand against mine when I brought her coffee, smile softly, and whisper, "I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words would hit me right in the chest, and for a moment, the exhaustion melted away. But cracks were appearing, little lies here and there, inconsistencies I couldn't ignore forever. Sometimes she forgot to mention appointments. Other times a friend would casually mention seeing her in places she'd said she'd been resting. One evening, while I was balancing spreadsheets on the kitchen counter, she leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and said, "You're stressing over nothing again, love. Can't you just let me handle some things?" Her voice was sweet, but there was an edge I couldn't place. I looked at her, my hand hovering over the calculator, and wondered why every bit of evidence seemed to point into completely different directions. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself that pregnancy hormones, stress, and deadlines explained the discrepancies. I even found myself smiling at her quirks, imagining our baby's room, painting the walls, and folding tiny clothes. I was building a life in my head, while simultaneously juggling financial chaos in reality. And yet, deep down, that whisper in the back of my mind refused to go away. Something was off. Something Claire wasn't telling me on. I couldn't ignore it forever. I just didn't know how far down the rabbit hole I was about to fall. The first real crack came when Claire canceled a prenatal appointment again. It was the third one she'd postponed, always with a new excuse. Scheduling conflicts, feeling too sick, the doctor rescheduling last minute. I didn't question it at first. I just asked if she needed me to rebook it for her, and she smiled and said, "You're so sweet, but I've got it under control." But something inside me had started to shift. That whisper in the back of my mind was louder now, harder to ignore. So one afternoon, while she was in the shower, I quietly checked the calendar app we shared. There was no record of any OB visits. Not one. I froze. My stomach turned cold, like someone had poured ice water down my spine. Maybe she just forgot to add them, I thought. Maybe she changed apps. Maybe... Later that week, one of my coworkers mentioned he'd seen Claire at a rooftop lounge downtown on a Friday night. "She looked great, man," he said. "Didn't even look pregnant," he laughed, not knowing he was shoving a knife into my chest. Claire had told me she was curled up at home with cramps that night. That evening, I asked her calmly if she went out recently. She blinked, tilted her head. "I mean, yeah, just for an hour or two. I needed fresh air." "Why?" Her tone was so nonchalant, it made me doubt myself. I didn't push. Not yet. But the more I looked back, the more moments didn't add up. The baggy clothes. The closed bathroom door during pregnancy tests. The lack of ultrasound pictures. I wanted to believe it was all innocent. I needed to, because the alternative meant the woman I married was lying to me on a level I couldn't yet face. And worse it meant. It built my entire future on a lie I hadn't even uncovered yet. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Claire, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of a truth I wasn't ready to confront. Her breathing was calm, slow, like she had no idea the foundation beneath us was crumbling in my mind. And maybe she didn't, or maybe she knew and just didn't care. The next morning, just after she left to visit a friend, I sat at the kitchen table and opened her laptop. The guilt hit me immediately. This wasn't me. I wasn't the type to snoop or violate trust. But trust only works when both people are telling the truth. And Claire. Claire had stopped telling me the truth a long time ago. I dug through her email first. Most of it was normal newsletters, shopping sites, old school threads. But then I saw it. A recent confirmation from a local clinic. An appointment for a consultation, not prenatal care. The subject line read, "Follow-up, reproductive health." Visit scheduled for last month. I clicked through with shaking hands. No mention of pregnancy, no mention of a baby. Just a short thank you for discussing family planning options. My chest felt like it was being crushed. I sat there in stunned silence. Rereading the same sentence over and over, Claire walked in about an hour later, cheerful, holding a shopping bag. I stared at her, and for a moment, I wanted to confront her right then, explode, demand answers. But I didn't. I played dumb. I smiled. I asked her how her friend was doing. She didn't flinch. And that terrified me more than anything, because now I knew. She wasn't just lying about being pregnant. She'd never been pregnant at all. Everything dashed the tears, the late-night cravings, the canceled appointments, had been a performance. And I had funded the entire show, but I wasn't going to react. Not yet. I needed to know why. I needed to know how deep this went. And more than anything, I needed a plan. I thought the fake pregnancy was the betrayal until I realized it was just the surface. That night, while Claire slept, I sat in the dim light of our living room, her laptop glowing in my lap. I couldn't stop digging. I needed answers. I needed the full truth, no matter how ugly it got. I found a hidden folder on her desktop. Inside were PDFs of loan documents, ones I hadn't seen before. Multiple accounts. Some maxed out, some recently paid off. But here's what shattered me. None of those payments were mine. Not from the joint account. Not from any transfers I'd made. They were coming from another account. One I didn't know existed. Then came the real punch to the gut. I found screenshots of her text conversations with someone saved as Eli. Flirty, personal, familiar. My chest clenched as I read. He's still buying it. Poor guy thinks I'm pregnant. When this is over, I'll have enough saved to get out. It's just a few more months and I'll drain the rest. I slammed the laptop shut so hard it echoed. My legs wouldn't move. My hands trembled. I sat there, frozen, processing what I'd just read. She hadn't just lied about being pregnant. She hadn't just used me to pay off her loans. She was planning to leave. With everything, all those nights I stayed late to work. All the times I skipped seeing my family, all the moments I broke my own back to fund her future was nothing more than a stepping stone in her escape plan. The version of Claire I'd loved didn't exist. She had never existed. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not with rage. Not with tears. But with absolute clarity. She thought she was the one running the game. But she forgot something important. I was the one who paid for everything. And I was about to take it all back. The next few days were unbearable. I didn't confront her, not yet. I couldn't. I needed to be smarter than that. But every time she touched me, every time she smiled or kissed my cheek, I felt sick. Like I was living with a stranger in my own home. And worse, pretending not to know she was planning to gut me emotionally and financially. I stopped sleeping. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, hearing her breathe next to me. Sometimes I'd go sit in the car just to scream where she couldn't hear me. The betrayal wasn't just in her lies, it was in the intimacy she faked so easily. The idea that she could look me in the eyes, call me babe, say I love you, while plotting to disappear with everything I'd ever worked for. It crushed me. One night I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize who I'd become. I had dark circles under my eyes. My skin looked pale and drained. I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. I canceled plans with friends, ignored texts, stopped calling my mom. I couldn't bring myself to explain what was happening because even saying it out loud felt humiliating. How do you tell someone the person you love most in the world lied about carrying your child? Just to bleed you dry? And yet, through all of that, some small, buried part of me still wanted to believe there was a misunderstanding. Some pathetic piece of me wished she'd just come clean. Break down crying, beg for forgiveness, and we'd fix it. But the version of Claire I'd fallen for wasn't real. She never was. And realizing that the love I felt had been unreciprocated, transactional. Weaponized, that was the lowest I'd ever been in my life. But something shifted in me that night. Not out of rage, but survival. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. Not quietly. Not completely. She wanted to drain me dry and disappear. I was going to make sure she had nothing left to walk away with. The narrator hits emotional and psychological. Rock bottom after discovering not just the fake pregnancy, but also Claire's secret communications and plan to leave him. He isolates himself, battles with exhaustion and heartbreak, feels utterly destroyed, but by the end, something in him shifts. He vows not to be broken, but to fight back. Silently, once the shock wore off, something cold and focused took its place. I stopped crying. I stopped pacing the kitchen at 3 a.m. I stopped waiting for answers. Claire had played me, and now it was my turn to play her. But I had to be quiet. Precise. No emotional outbursts. No scenes. Just strategy. I started with the finances. I requested copies of our joint bank statements and quietly froze any new credit cards we hadn't activated. Then I opened a new account under my name only and began redirecting my paychecks there. I called a lawyer, a quiet, no-nonsense woman named Dana, who listened without judgment as I laid it all out. She told me exactly what I needed to gather: proof of financial manipulation, fake pregnancy, any evidence of intent to defraud. So I went to work. I took photos of every loan document, every fake medical email, every text to Eli. I screen-recorded browser histories, took backup copies of cloud storage, and even found a folder on her phone titled Dream Life Vision Board with pictures of apartments in Italy and wedding rings she never wore. Meanwhile, I acted like nothing had changed. I still kissed her forehead in the morning, still asked how she was feeling, still made dinner. She had no idea I was building a wall behind her one. She wouldn't see until it was too late. I even started mirroring her lies. Told her I'd picked up more freelance work and would be out late, when in reality I was meeting with Dana, signing forms, and getting every single shared asset documented, evaluated, and legally protected. It was exhausting to pretend, but also liberating. For the first time in weeks, I had a plan. I wasn't just surviving. I was reclaiming control. Claire thought she had the upper hand. She thought I'd break quietly, but I wasn't going to let her walk away with a single thing I'd built. And very soon, she was going to find that out. The day I chose to confront Claire, the sky was great. Clouds hung low, pressing against the windows like they could feel the weight of what was coming. I'd rehearsed what I'd say 100 times. I didn't want yelling. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted truth and consequences. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had changed, like she hadn't been plotting to gut me like some naive, disposable fool. I stood in front of her and said, calm as stone, we need to talk about Eli. Her face dropped. Not confusion, not denial, just flat panic. A flicker of calculation before she masked it with a fake frown. Who? She asked too quickly. I didn't respond. I handed her a printed copy of the texts, then another with the clinic email, and finally, a full spreadsheet of every financial transaction I'd compiled. Payments she rerouted, accounts she hid, the pattern of manipulation. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes darted to the front door like she was debating if she could outrun the moment. I know about the fake pregnancy, I said. I know about the money. I know everything. For a second, she slumped. The performance cracked. Then she launched into her final act: tears, apologies, frantic explanations. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was scared. You just don't understand what it's like. I listened. Not because I cared, but because I wanted her to feel heard before I took it all away. I told her about the lawyer, about the asset freeze, about how I'd locked the joint accounts that morning. Her face went pale. She tried to argue, but the panic was rising fast. Her safety net had vanished. You lied about everything, I said quietly. You built a future on my back and planned to walk away with it. But now, you'll leave with nothing. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. But it wasn't over yet. Not until the last piece was removed. Not until justice was done. Claire didn't say much the next morning. She moved around the house like a ghost, quiet, careful, waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. I just kept doing what I'd planned. Checking documents, signing forms, taking back control. First came the joint bank accounts. I had already filed the request to freeze activity, but with Dana's help, I got temporary control. Every dollar I'd earned that she hadn't spent was now safe. Then came the car legally in my name, despite her always referring to it as ours. I took the spare key and parked it at my coworker's place overnight. She didn't even notice. Claire tried to protest when the next step hit. Our landlord called to confirm she'd been removed from the lease. She stormed into the living room, waving her phone. "You can't just erase me like this," she snapped. I stayed calm. "You already erased yourself. I'm just making it official."
God, then.
I served her with separation paperwork neatly filed, ironclad, and backed by every shred of evidence I'd collected over the last month. The look on her face, this mixture of disbelief and desperation, was something I'll never forget. She tried again to flip the script. "You don't understand. I didn't want to hurt you. This was never supposed to go that far. We can still fix this." I just looked at her and said, "You faked a pregnancy to drain my life savings and run off with another man. We're far past fixing anything." That was the last real conversation we had. By the end of the week, she was gone. Dana made sure everything was documented: joint debts assigned fairly, assets protected, credit reports updated. I even got back a portion of what she'd siphoned through legal mediation. It wasn't revenge in the way people think of it. No shouting matches, no screaming breakdowns. Just quiet, calculated justice. And for the first time in months, my home felt still, peaceful. But there was one more thing I had to face: what all of this had done to me. And whether I could rebuild from the wreckage she left behind, the silence in the apartment was different now. Not empty, just quiet, peaceful. There were no more half-lies being whispered from across the couch. No more fake smiles masking hidden agendas. Just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional creak of old floorboards. I started rebuilding, slowly. I reconnected with friends I'd ghosted during the chaos. I called my mom and told her everything. She cried, not just out of sympathy, but guilt. "You didn't deserve any of that," she whispered. For the first time, I believed her. Claire tried to reach out once, Moran email. No apology, no ownership. Just vague lines like, "I was going through a lot, and you have to understand, I never wanted to hurt you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She'd made her choices. The most powerful part of healing was realizing I didn't need revenge. That screamed. I didn't need to destroy her publicly or expose her online. The quiet dismantling I orchestrated, reclaiming my finances, my future. That was more satisfying than any screaming match ever could have been. People around me started noticing a shift. A colleague pulled me aside and said, "You seem lighter." I didn't feel light yet, but I was getting there. I poured myself into better routines. I took long walks in the evening, let the cold wind bite at my face, until I remembered what it felt like to be alone without feeling lonely. I started journaling, writing down all the ways I'd ignored red flags. Not to shame myself, but to make sure I never did it again. Most importantly, I stopped blaming myself. Claire didn't just deceive me, she chose to. That wasn't a flaw in me. That was a decision in her. And once I let go of that guilt, I started to breathe differently, deeper, clearer. She took my trust. She tried to take everything else, but in the end, I still had the one thing she never could: fake my integrity. And from that, I could rebuild everything. It's strange how healing doesn't arrive with fireworks or closure speeches. It sneaks in, quietly, slowly, like the moment you realize you haven't thought about them in days, or when your chest doesn't tighten every time you hear their name. That's how it started for me. There wasn't one big epiphany, just moments. I walked past the baby section in a store and didn't freeze. I saw a photo of us buried in the back of an old folder and didn't flinch. I even drove past the bar where a friend had spotted her that night, laughing, glowing, while I was home scraping pennies into her future. And I felt nothing. I was free. I began building a version of myself I'd long abandoned. I took a short trip to the mountains, a lawn, just me, a backpack in silence. No phones, no schedules. I sat by a frozen lake and just breathed. And for the first time in forever, I didn't feel broken. I felt clean. What Claire did to me was cruel, manipulative, calculated, but what I did in response, that mattered more. I didn't become her. I didn't lie. I didn't cheat. I didn't destroy. I built. I protected. I adapted. And maybe the best revenge isn't making someone hurt the way they hurt you. Maybe the best revenge is becoming someone so grounded, so untouchable, that their chaos can't reach you anymore. Would I ever trust like that again? Maybe not. Or maybe just more carefully. But I'd never hate myself again for believing in someone. That wasn't weakness. It was hope. And if I lost it once, I'd damn well earn it back. I still get moments, quiet ones, where grief creeps in. For the man I was before her. For the version of us I once believed in. But then, I remind myself, she didn't destroy me. She revealed me. And I kinda like the man I found underneath it all.